In this episode of the Business of E-commerce, I talk with Chloe Thomas about choosing where to focus your time and attention. This is the Business of E-commerce, episode 158. Welcome to the Business of E-commerce, the show that helps e-commerce retailers start, launch, and grow their e-commerce business. I'm your host, Charles Plesky, and I'm here today with Chloe Thomas. Chloe is an author and the host of the eCommerce MasterPlan podcast, where they provide online training, advice, and information for growing e-commerce businesses. On this show, me and Chloe go really deep into the topic of mindset, and specifically choosing where to focus your time and attention and how to focus that attention. I think this is super helpful for anyone, and this is a big topic that I think is often overlooked, and it's really one of those things, if you get this right, it doesn't just have linear effects, but it also kind of multiplies, and it can really move the needle. So super interesting interview. There's a bunch of book recommendations that I definitely think you should check out, and I'll drop those all in the show notes. So let's get right into the interview. So hey, Chloe, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Charles. It's great to be here, getting to talk to you about all things e-com.
Yeah, I love having also another podcaster on the show. You are the host. You're an author, right? But also the host of the eCommerce MasterPlan.
I am, yeah. Host of the eCommerce MasterPlan podcast, which is where I interview retailers, and of the Keep Optimizing podcast, where we focus on a different marketing method each month. It's with mainly supplier side guests and experts. So yeah, podcasting cool. Seems to take up a huge amount of my time these days.
Yep. Nice. I like it. Well, we were talking earlier before the show, few ideas, and mentioned kind of the whole going into the mindset. And every once in a while, I love talking to someone about this exact topic, just on, I feel like it's like a force multiplier, right? Like you can talk all you want about like Facebook ads and like that works. But like, if you want to make any sort of large shift, it always comes to changing just like a complete mindset change, a direction change. And the easiest way to do that is changing your mindset about what direction you should be moving. Do you agree? Or?
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, I've been helping people solve their marketing problems in e-commerce and their e-commerce problems in general for about 15, 16, 17 years now. And there's kind of two questions that everything I ever get asked boils down to. And one is, Chloe, what should I be doing? And the other one is, Chloe, is what I'm doing what I should be doing? Because I think there's so much we could be doing. Success comes from focusing in on the right things. And unless you've got your head in the right space, you know what you're trying to achieve in your life, for your business, you know what your strengths are, your weaknesses are, and you got your head in the right place. Unless you've got all those things in place, you can't make good decisions about what you should be focusing your time and effort on. And it's very easy to spend, and I fall in this trap about once every couple of years and have to, kind of hit myself around the head and go, God, you're doing it again, which is to think that busy means successful. And they are two completely different things. They're not even on the same scale. How busy you are has got nothing to do with how successful you are. But it often we think as long as we're filling our time with something, we're doing okay. So I think mindset, it's kind of like the bedrock on which we build everything else.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I think we kind of grow up in school and kind of learning on like, people do well, the kids that are sitting there like with their flashcards before the test and they're like staying up all night, and you go to college and it's like the same thing. And then you kind of realize when you kind of get into the field that if you're just sprinting as fast as you can, and then some unbelievable opportunity comes along, you're already going full throttle. Yeah. And you don't have any way to like scale up to that thing. It's always like you need to leave some slack.
Yeah, you've got to make space for good stuff to happen as well. Yes. I'm very much not in the camp of fill every waking moment with something. I'm very much not in the camp of you should be working 7 days a week to make a business successful. You've got to have that downtime to let the unconscious have time to kind of work its way through things. And I've often found that, forcing myself to make space, saying you will finish at this time every night, you will not work weekends, has often created the situation which has brought me the greatest success in all aspects of life and business, because I find it very hard to say no to things. And by focusing in on, right, you can only do X number of hours a week. It's like, well, I've got to say no to some things. And it really focuses the mind on making better decisions around that too.
This week's episode is sponsored by Repricing. Repricing is a competitor price tracking and repricing tool that helps e-commerce companies make intelligent pricing decisions. Using a dashboard and daily Excel reports, online sellers can monitor price changes and immediately make pricing adjustments. Here are some features that I love about Repricing. First is Smart Match. What Smart Match does is allows Repricing to search for your competitors and attach their prices right on your dashboard so you can monitor their pricing changes against competitors you already know about. They find competitors you didn't even know existed. Once you have that, you can configure your repricing rules. What this does is you can now set your prices to be based on the average price, the lowest price, the highest price of your competitors, go up and down. And also you can say, don't go lower than my cost by plus $5. Whatever you want to do, you can set these rules and Repricing will automatically adjust your prices. Next is price change notifications. You can set rules to when prices change. Repricing will send you a notification alerting you of your competitors' pricing changes. Last but not least is a price history. You can then go in to the dashboard and look up all the pricing changes over time that Repricing has been monitoring. That way you know just because it's lower today, they might just be having a sale and it might come back tomorrow. You can see all your competitors on one chart. Super cool. I urge you to check it out. Thanks again for Repricing for sponsoring this week's episode. Now back to the show. We were talking before the show, and I sent you a tweet, actually. It's something I had kind of in my little Twitter drafts for a while. And then we were talking before the show, I was like, you know what? I'm going to actually publish this today. I'm kind of just reading it. Two of the most important yet difficult things for a founder to do are choosing the correct things to focus your time and attention on, and two, focusing on that thing. How do you kind of feel about that?
Oh, totally. I think it's kind of worse in the e-com space to be able to work out what to do and then to focus on it. And if I focus on the focusing part here, we are surrounded by an industry that likes to create content and distraction. You know, it's especially when now we're in this world of pandemic, everyone's creating online content. There's not the offline events anymore. It's all the webinar on this and you must know about that. And of course, marketers are trying to get you to read their blog, to attend their webinar, to watch their video, to listen to their podcast, because it is crucial for you to listen to. But you have to see it all through this kind of filter of what's relevant to me. And it's so easy to get sucked into, this is very cool, that's very cool. I think I said to you, beforehand, last night I was chairing a conference that a friend of mine runs, and it was on a new platform that I hadn't used before called, I can't remember the name of it now. And it was like super cool new platform where you can put banners in and all this cool.
Oh, was this Clubhouse? Was that?
No, this wasn't Clubhouse. This was
okay.
It was a streaming service, and we were doing like a virtual summit, a live virtual summit.
Okay.
And it was just such a cool platform that I got so totally distracted by it. I was almost, during sessions writing plans of how I'm going to run loads of events. It's like, events is not in your plan for 2021, Chloe. You spent ages working on this plan and one cool piece of software, which you're going to get to use every month as part of this conference series that someone else is running. You've just completely ignored your plan for the year and just got excited about a whole other strategy, which doesn't fit with any of the aims or objectives. It was just a cool piece of software. So I say that because just to show how easy it is, and you have to create that filter based on what you're good at, what's right for your business, where you're trying to get to, and then you can kind of filter through what you should be buying, what you should be using, what you should be paying attention to, and that will help you stay on track. But you can't focus unless you know what you're supposed to be doing.
So actually, that's the first part. How do you know what you should be doing then? So you said you sat down and came up with a plan.
Yes.
Even doing that, I feel like you go to these online summits and there's someone up there saying like, content, blogging, and you're like, great, I'll definitely do a lot of blogging. They're like, Facebook ads, you're like, I'll definitely do that too.
TikTok.
And like video on YouTube. Yeah, TikTok. And you're like, obviously I'm going to do TikTok. And like Clubhouse, and like, got to do some of that. And then by the end, you're like, all right, I'm going to do none of these. Like, this is insane. So like, how do you, and the thing is, each one of those folks that kind of went up on stage and a virtual stage right now and said like, this worked for my business. It was great. It did. That's the thing. But how do you know, okay, which one of those should I be doing? Like you can't do all of them. So how do you know where to focus your time? And should you even be focusing on that sort of growth, like marketing side, or should be doubling down and saying, could we smooth our customer service out, smooth our logistics side? Like, because there's so many other places internally that maybe you're paying all this money to kind of bring leads in, but how do you even know, maybe they're not converting. We could be upselling them better. We should be doubling down after the checkout. Like, how do you know that part of it?
Well, like back in the day, I used to one-on-one help people to work out what they should be doing, and what I've spent kind of like the last maybe 6-7 years is trying to turn what I used to do one-on-one for people into some models and systems that businesses can use themselves, business owners can use themselves, marketers can use themselves in order to connect the dots, in order to make those decisions. And then, I've tried to design them to keep people on track. And I guess, I don't think there's kind of, if we go through 3 of them, I think this will help everyone out there. So the first one is think in quarters. So think 3 months at a time and focus on something, whatever it is you're doing, for a full 3 months. Because one of the stupidest things we do as human beings is we go, right, I'll spend Monday working on that and do a little bit. And then I'll spend Tuesday working on this and I'll do a little bit on that. So maybe you spend Monday and you write half a blog post. Tuesday, you set up some Facebook ads, but not as far as you can put them live. Then Wednesday, you got obsessed by TikTok. So you spend the day trying to work out how to record a TikTok video. Thursday, you then go, oh my God, we need a new courier. And then Friday, implode or something. And nothing's finished. Everything's half done. And you've not really immersed yourself in properly learning it, because all these marketing channels we're talking about, if you want to do them well, you've got to test and optimize and test and optimize and learn and test and optimize. And it takes time to learn it. And if you're trying to learn 3 at once, you're doomed to failure. So my first thing is to think in quarters, and across a quarter, think about maybe 3 things you're going to focus on. That's what I try to do. I try to focus on 3 things. And that might be this quarter, you're going to master Facebook ads and you're going to sort out your pick, pack and dispatch process so as you can get some time back from that. And then the third part is that you're going to, something else, find a new product range or expand the business or something, so try and limit it to 3. And those are the big things you're going to focus on for the quarter. Then you can master them. And whilst you're working on those, still okay to get inspired with cool things and cool ideas, but have a list of stuff you're not doing this quarter. I do mine in a Google spreadsheet. You might do yours in a notebook, an Evernote, a Google Doc, a Word doc, doesn't matter. It could be a list on your phone, but keep a list of cool things that you might do in the future. And then when you get to the end of the quarter, you can kind of bring that back and go, brilliant. I've got a big list of ideas. Which one am I excited by? Which one do I think is going to make the difference? So that's that's the first model. Charles, you okay if I go into the second model?
Yeah, it also just reminds me of the book Traction.
Yes.
I'm guessing you've read that. Yeah, that makes me, and I've mentioned this before in the show, and it feels like every time someone talks about this, like planning, traction is like this like thread. I always see these common things that run through that book and what people, successful plans basically on break stuff into quarters. And I'll link to that. And if people haven't read it, they have a whole framework around this. And I think it's fantastic. It's amazing.
Book.
All right. Okay.
This is the book on getting focused in quarters. It's called the 12-week year. The 12-week year, and it's by Moran and Lennington, and they're taking lessons from the big sports companies. And those of you on the video, you can see I've even got tabs in this. This is how many times I refer to this book. Genius book for focusing on quarters. Talking of books, my second piece of advice for your listeners is in this book, which is my most recent book, been a bestseller in the UK for the last 12 months, and it's called eCommerce Marketing: How to Get Traffic That Buys to Your Website. I like to think it's a little bit like the Traction for e-commerce, but coming at it from a very different angle. in that I've got chapters on different marketing methods. But Traction's such an amazing book. I'm not sure one can ever live up to it. Anyway, before I convince you all not to read my book, I'm just flicking through to find the model I want to tell you all about, because this, I think, is crucial for the world of e-commerce. And it's a model I call my customer MasterPlan model. And I'll talk it through for those of you who are listening. So it's e-commerce drilled down into 6 circles and a number of arrows. Okay, so if you imagine left to right going across your screen, you've got 6 circles left to right. We've got the world, visitors, inquirers, first-time buyers, repeat buyers, and regular buyers. None of those phrases should be a surprise to anyone listening in the world of e-commerce. And these circles are the customer relationship level. So all the people in the world fit into one of these circles for your business and their relationship with you. And where we focus as e-commerce people is we focus on moving people between the customer relationship levels. So when you're thinking about those quarters, work out, where are you weakest? Are you weakest in getting people from the world to visit your website? Are you weakest in getting their email address once they get there? Are you weakest in turning them into a buyer? Are you weakest in turning them into a repeat buyer, into a regular buyer? Where's your weakness, or where's there the great opportunity? And then focus on that stage and fixing it for the full quarter. And that could pull in marketing ideas, website improvements, UX improvements, customer service improvements, packaging improvements, whatever you need to do. And if you focus on one for a whole quarter, you'll make such a big improvement.
Yeah, I like the idea of doing that, because you kind of have to tick-tock back and forth. There's going to be some point where you're like, we just don't have enough traffic. Okay, we need more traffic. Like, we just need to figure this out. And then at some point you get enough traffic and then you're like, but why aren't they checking out? Okay, we need to figure that out. And if you're successful, they get to a point where they're like, okay, the fulfillment, the logistics is just like crushing us, or the support after the fact is it's beating us up. So you need to almost like, it's just like pendulum back and forth. And then at some point, okay, I get after the checkout figured out, it's nailed down, and you're like, let's have more traffic. And you kind of have to swing back to that direction. And as soon as you do that, you're going to break something else. And you're just in this constant breaking, fixing, and coming back and breaking again. And it's a process. It's
a bit like playing whack-a-mole, but I guess what I try to do is to make the whack-a-mole focus be on a slightly larger area and encompass a longer time span than every day whacking another mole, because I think otherwise you never get out of that cycle of urgent problems. You want to get into improvements rather than fixing errors, I suppose. And I think focusing over a longer time period and in one of those key stages between the customer relationship levels really is a good way to go about getting out of just the firefighting scenario.
Yeah, every day I try to remind myself to, spend some time focusing on the important over the urgent, because the urgent's always going to be there. And you open up your email and you'll find someone has something urgent they're going to send to you. And sure, I could definitely be doing that. But the important stuff, that's the stuff no one's going to be coming to you going like, you need to do this today. Yeah, that's up to you to sit down and sit back and kind of push back a little bit away from the desk and say, what's important right now? And not just, let's open the email and let's figure out the next, let's slam a coffee back and go.
Yeah, it's like I was saying earlier about how you can get obsessed by being busy in order to feel like you're achieving something. It
feels good. It feels great. It's addictive.
Yeah, it's like some days I find myself almost like flicking through LinkedIn, 2 email inboxes and Twitter, almost waiting for something to happen so I can feel like I've achieved something. And it's those days I'm like, yeah, I need to finish on time tonight, because I've reached a point I'm just scrolling through looking for something to respond to make myself feel like I've achieved something. And that's a sign you need some time out, everybody.
It makes me feel like I'm a dopamine junkie, where I'm just waiting for that next hit of like something on Twitter, something popping up, and I'm like, I'm going to do this instantly. Yeah, I'm going to get that little rush and
someone totally irrelevant, please try and get on my podcast so as I can reply to you. That's how really need a break now.
Yes, 100% agree. So I like the idea of breaking it up into quarters and kind of looking, and that kind of gives you a longer and less whack-a-mole. So at least that you can sit back. And there are certain things that you can't really get into unless you really put some distance between you and those urgent things. You might need to sit there and think through something, journal, whatever your thought process is like whiteboard something. And if you're sitting there just like crushing emails every day, you're not going to do that.
Yeah, you've got to create that brain space for you. And personally, I find, diary blocking can be a great way of doing that. Looking at the week, on a Friday, sit down and go, right, next week, Monday's going to be about this, Tuesday's going to be about this, Wednesday's going to be about this. And even if you do that, trust me, you're probably going to need to go that Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I'll deal with the inbox thoroughly. Otherwise, if you're anything like me, you'll be like, there's things in the inbox and you can't concentrate on anything anyway. So yeah, try and work out a rhythm that works for you.
If everyone's watching on video, since we're just pulling random books off camera, there's one actually. I happen to have that at arm's length too. They sell this productivity planner. They break up the week and they literally give you a space where you write out your weekly plan, and then you break that into each day and you set your most important. And every week, the goal is to take stuff from last week, figure out what's important that week, and it kind of fits with the whole traction model of taking your quarter and then breaking that down. Okay, I know my 3-year goal. I know now what's this year. Okay, what's this quarter? Now let's come up this, sit down on a Sunday, come up with this week plan. And now when you come Monday morning, you don't just get, this like whiplash on like, all right, what should I work on? And like you open your inbox and you're like, let's do that one right there.
Yeah.
You sit down and Monday, here's what I'm going to work on. And then when I'm done, okay, the email will still be there. Like the IMs, everything will still be there. But at least it gives you something these are the important things I'm going to get done. And there's only, like you said, there's only going to be a few of them. There's some overall larger ones. And then here are the big to-dos to move forward in those. So I love that concept. So I derailed you at number 2 though. So what was number 2?
So number 1 was thinking quarters. Number 2 was the customer master plan model to make sure you're segmenting your e-commerce work based on where your customers are in that journey. And then the third one is one which I got from a podcast guest. An amazing lady who runs a business selling goat milk products, of all things. And she does this. And I think it's so genius. I keep repeating it to people, which is when you're thinking about when you think about e-commerce, there are, the basic equation is traffic times conversion rate times average order value equals sales, right? So we've kind of got 3 things we can do to grow our sales. One is improve the conversion rate. One is improve the traffic volumes, and the other one is improve the average order value. And she likes to think across the year of each quarter she works on one of them. So it comes back to the quarterly planning again. So think of a stage you're going to work at in that customer master plan model, my number 2, but then also think about, are we working on traffic? Are we working on conversion rate? Are we working on average order value? Partly because if you try and work on 2 at once, you won't know which one's working, but also because then you really, really get to grips with what for my audience is going to improve the AOV, is going to improve the traffic. Now, the chances are you're going to do traffic twice in a year and you'll work on the other 2 for 1 quarter each. But it's almost giving you the freedom to go, I don't need to worry about average order value until next quarter. I'm just going to focus on traffic. I'm just going to focus on this. And clearing stuff out of the way can be a really great way to give you that mind space to actually make the improvements that work.
I like that. So you're saying having some like almost like themes to the quarter.
Yeah.
Here's the theme, traffic and the type where the customer is in their journey, and then just focusing on that for that quarter and kind of digging deep into that.
Yeah, exactly. It gives you so much clarity on what to do, and it makes it so much easier to decide what should I be doing at this point in time? What's the most important thing I could be doing?
I think sometimes the thing that people run into when they're trying to do this is they set these larger themes up, like you were saying, and that day or at that moment they're blocked, right? There's something else happening where we're doing a CMS migration the other day, and there was consultants doing this, and all sorts of specs went out, and then they were all just working. And for me personally, okay, I'm just kind of waiting and like, all right, I can check in with them each day, but like, how much of that could, you're just being annoying at some point. So you've done a lot of work up front, and now a lot of balls are in someone else's court, sort of thing. What do you do with those days because if you're like, hey, I should be busy because that's like what I'm told to do, you're going to just start going back to your old habits and get busy. And then when the consultants come back and say, hey, can you review this? You're like, I don't have time. I'm checking Twitter.
Busy with the all the old stuff. Yeah, I think
I'm busy with the unimportant stuff. Yeah.
I think partly it's just being aware you have that kind of a tendency and then checking yourself and going, actually, it's also about looking, you were saying about, uh, mapping out your weeks for the quarter and looking when the different projects are going to need you. When are you going to be needed to do this? Because if you're using consultants, etc., then you know when something's going to be coming back, or you should have a pretty good idea when something's coming back and you need to worry about it. So if you know that next week XYZ consultants coming back to you with something you're either going to need to action or review or sign off or test or something, you go, okay, next week I'm 2 days down. So what should I be doing this week to make sure I've got 2 days to deal with it next week? So it's always a case of kind of, am I putting things out to other people, or am I making space to deal with the stuff that comes back from them? And it's about taking a step back on quite a regular basis and going, what actually, to achieve what I want this quarter, what do I need to do this week? And what I should also say is things change. And what you think you're doing in week 13 of the quarter, a bit in week 0, is probably not going to be the same thing, because something will have taken longer, something will have taken less time. So you will probably at least once a month, if not almost every week, be slightly retweaking those deadlines, because there's nothing worse than discovering in week 2 that something's not going to be achievable in the quarter, but leaving it there as a goal, because it's just going to make you feel awful, and under pressure and failing. So always tweak these things based on what you learn as you go through the journey, because in a quarter, you're going to learn an awful lot about what is and isn't possible. So do adapt.
Yeah, that was actually one of the questions I was writing down when you were saying that you have these great plans. Was it Mike Tyson quote? Everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. And you have, okay.
Haven't heard that one.
No, I think it's Tyson, but yeah, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face, where, you come up with these great plans. And this was, I think, last year, we had a plan for the quarter and we're going to focus on this. And there was some huge infrastructure meltdown, and we needed to migrate a database. It went from thinking oh, we have quarters to no, this week, this is happening. So all of a sudden it's no, this is all hands on deck. This is just what we're going to be doing. Bring a DBA on, and that's that. And so there's no there's no optionality. You either do it or you just do it. There's no choice, right? So that whole plan just gets flushed out the window. And I think that's tough sometimes, because you come up with these plans, and if you plan too far out, then all of a sudden now you're all right, I have to push out every date. And I think we have a tendency to do, when you said 3 things, that gives you that slack that you need, right? Yeah. So when you do get punched in the face, it's not going to ruin all of a sudden, okay, we're missing everything. We had 50 things we're going to do, and 49 of them are just out the window now. 3, you're building in some slack, some margin. And I think that's what a lot of people do, is they overestimate their abilities. I do it too.
Yeah. You're I'm so easily done.
I'm going to move the world. I'm going to move this. I'm going to be huge. And then you just feel sad after that. Okay, I didn't do 50 things. That's terrible. But if you set it down to something reasonable, that gives you that room to expand and contract when needed.
Oh, completely. And whilst, it sounds a bit crazy, we're going to create this plan, but we know it's going to change. It's an awful lot easier to change if you've got a plan in the first place. Whereas if you have a blank sheet of paper and you're constantly firefighting, and then something like that massive server migration comes along, then you kind of you get to the end of the server migration, you're probably a little bit worn out and frazzled around the edges. And you're going, what should I be doing? I can't even remember what I should be doing anymore. So you just fall straight back into firefighting. Whereas if you've got a plan, you can at least go back and go, what should I have been doing last week? Right. What's the best way for us to recover from this? Not what's the best way for me this week to do all last week's work as well, but how do we rejig it to make it possible for us still to do great work?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think the hard part about all of this is we're all, in this kind of digital world, addicted to that dopamine, right? That rush of if you're a founder, whatever you're doing, even just anything now, you're addicted to just producing. And when you have to, it feels it feels almost wrong sometimes. And you have to really teach yourself to slowing down and planning. Planning is still work, but it doesn't feel like work on that planning day. That planning time feels very different, and it doesn't give you that same high, but you have to kind of, do you have any tricks to kind of reminding yourself that this planning work is actually planning to work on the right thing is actually like more important in a lot of cases than just doing a bunch of work just because.
Yeah, my problem is that I could spend all day planning and never actually get anything done.
Oh,
It's probably my most favorite form of procrastination, but then you realize that about yourself and you try not to spend too much time planning, and then you realize you should have spent more time planning. So it's kind of a vicious circle. So what I try to do is I try to have a rhythm across the month, across the quarter, of when I do certain things. So, on a Thursday or Friday, I'll plan the following week's work. Well, that's when I get in depth into what the following week is going to be. At the end of each
do you have
day,
this blocked off in your calendar sort of thing? Like this is my
it's
Thursday
kind of
planning time?
it's a standard task for ideally for a Thursday, but often it falls into Friday, and that's okay in my world. So it's not quite a blocked off space, but Fridays I always have no meetings, and that's when I set, deal with podcast stuff and various other things. But it fits in that day of tasks, and then that sets up the week. And then in the last 2 weeks of the quarter is when I'll start looking at the following quarter, because there's no point in looking at it sooner than that in my business, in most businesses. And there's no point in fully fleshing out what 2 weeks from now looks like. I'll dump stuff into 2 weeks from now and 4 weeks from now and 5 weeks from now, depending on things that I know have to happen then. But I'm not going to go in depth to it until the time comes. So it's kind of spacing out the diary in that way, I find is the way to do it. So a regular weekly check-in, and at some point towards the end of each day, do a detailed plan for the following day, because things can even go awry in a week, and you may have to revisit and go, actually, I may have wanted to work on that awesome project tomorrow, but I've got this problem that I've got to solve that's more urgent. So I'll realign my goals around that one.
Yeah, I think it's important too for anyone listening. A lot of this comes down when we're saying a week or a month or a quarter. A quarter is kind of a natural time. Like it sounds very like businessy, like what's your Q1 plan, but it's just nice to break up. It actually feels kind of natural. I see how business folks decide to break up years into quarters because it just feels like it makes sense. But some of it does come down to scale, right? Like I've talked to retailers that they're in the hundreds of millions of revenue, and they look at stuff, they're building a warehouse, and like that you're planning out for, like their thought is just going out into 5-year plus plans at all times. Cause like if you're building, physical structures and just moving and you're doing that sort of level, you have to think further out. And also when the business was small, I would also think out by like 3 hours, and I had like 3 hours, and it was just a constant, because like literally the entire business could change in a matter of hours when we're of a certain scale. And so part of it is just depending on scale as well too.
I mean, I think yes, you're right. Sometimes there are those much longer term projects. If you're developing your own skincare products, that's longer than a month or a quarter to get that done and such things. But I think I generally come at things from kind of the marketing standpoint. And I think very few businesses can outline exactly what their marketing plan is going to be 12 months ahead these days. You mentioned Clubhouse, and I didn't know Clubhouse existed a month or so ago. And I've had 2 past podcast guests get in touch and ask me why I'm not yet on Clubhouse. That never happens. So that's been one of the curveballs I will be paying attention to in the next couple of weeks. But so marketing, I don't think even the biggest business can really go out much more than a quarter at a time in any depth in retail. And I think the smallest business should be thinking a quarter at a time, even though they feel like it's, they're probably still feeling like in that space. They're going, oh my God, it's Friday and we haven't sent an email this week. We better send an email. Or Christ, it's been 2 weeks since I looked at my Google ads. You need to be looking longer than just those short time spans. So I think for marketing, most businesses, a quarter's a really good way to be structuring things. But then you in the business, you may have those bigger projects like warehouse moves, etc., which have to be looked at over a longer time span.
I guess it has to be looked at over a long time span, but you can logically still break up pieces of that into the quarter, right? Like, you're going to want to migrate from, Magento to BigCommerce or whatever it is. And that might take 6 to 12 months or whatever that is. But you break that up into, okay, what do we, to get this big 12-month project going this quarter, what is the quarter piece of that project? So you can still break it off into little bite-sized chunks, it sounds like. And then it's a little more,
Yeah,
you can wrap your head around that.
completely. So it might be, Q1 is about working out exactly what you need from the new website and scoping out, making the decision, are you going Magento, BigCommerce, Shopify, or something else, and creating a short list of agencies. That might be your Q1 task. And then Q2 will be about identifying which agency's building it. Q3 will be about actually building. So it might be one of those three things. So you might have Facebook ads, you might have, we're going to focus on turning inquiries into buyers. And then the other thing which we're going to do is we're going to work on this big project. So it could be within the quarter, but you want to have some definite goals that happen within that quarter.
I like it. Awesome. It's a good place to end it. I think that was super helpful. I'm going to link to a bunch of good books in the show notes. So if anyone wants to check any of those out. And if also people want to kind of find you, check out the podcast, check out the book, what can they do that?
You can find everything I'm up to at ecommercemasterplan.com. There you'll find links to both the podcast and all the books I've written. You'll find links to information about the models I mentioned, and you'll find out how to get in contact with me too. So ecommercemasterplan.com.
Awesome. I'll link to that in the show notes. Thanks a lot for coming on. It's great having you.
It's been brilliant to be here and been a really interesting discussion. So thanks for having me on.